We talk about North Korea on the show almost every week, but usually it's with pundits, geostrategists, and occasionally advocates for refugees from there. But what about a person who just chooses to go there on a vacation? Well, that's our next guest from Ottawa, Paul Beaudry. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ezra, for having me.
You're welcome. What on earth would make you go to North Korea for a vacation?
Well, I'd always been interested in the history of North Korea and read a lot about it, watched a lot of documentaries about it. And I told myself, wow, I think I should go there and see it for myself, have a first-hand account of what is life in North Korea. So what I did was I booked a trip. There are agencies organizing trips going to North Korea, and flew to Beijing, and from Beijing took one of the trusty airplanes of Air Koryo and landed in Pyongyang.
Huh. Now, did you have to get a special visa or permission to fill out a special form? Did they interrogate you at the consulate or the embassy before you were allowed in?
Not really. Their policies in order to admit tourists are quite liberal. You'll only be blocked. I mean, you need to have a visa, but you'll only be blocked or prohibited entry if you've in the past written articles overtly against the regime, or you've taken part in demonstrations against the country, and they can figure that out when they evaluate your request. However, if you're not one of those people, they'll let you in because the regime needs some hard currency, and they love having tourists for that.
Now, when I was in China, I kept looking around wondering if I was being followed, if someone was watching me. And the only time I really felt that way was when I was in Tiananmen Square on the anniversary of the uprising. Did you feel like you were followed or bugged or listened to? Did you feel like you were being observed as a foreigner who might make trouble?
Well, I never felt like I was in danger or that I really was being watched. However, we have 3 guides that were with us. We were a group of about 17 tourists, and we had 3 guides and a driver. And I'm told they never send one guide with a group because that one guide could say whatever you want and there'd be nobody to mind him. And what we're told when we go there is to watch out what we say, not because of our security, but because we don't want to make the guides get in trouble. A lot of those people, when they get those jobs, there's some of the best jobs you can get in Pyongyang because they get tips in American or European money. And these are very good jobs, and they can feed their families for weeks with the tips they get every week. So we're told to watch out just because for their own safety and their own job security, we are asked not to ask them pointed questions about the regime and what they think about it.
Now, what were you shown? Were you only shown happy sights like Potemkin villages, they would be called, of happy people posing for you, well-fed people, well-stocked malls? Or were you allowed to see some of the desperate poverty in a country with a widespread famine where people are emaciated, where there's tragedy?
Well, most of the trip centers around Pyongyang. Pyongyang is a showcase capital. You don't see any handicapped people in Pyongyang, no poor people, or relatively poor for North Korean standards, because they're kicked out of the city. The people who are in Pyongyang are the most favored people in the regime. They're high-level bureaucrats, high-level army people, high-level government workers in general. So they don't have any qualms with the regime, or if they do have some, they keep silent about it because they want to stay in Pyongyang. If you're an undesirable, one of the worst punishments you can get when you live in Pyongyang is to do something wrong or talk against the regime, in which case you'll be kicked out of Pyongyang. We had the chance at a few occasions to get out of Pyongyang. One of those occasions was when we went to the demilitarized zone. And when we went to that zone, we passed through villages that were not as rich as what we had seen in Pyongyang. One of the most impressive or one of the most impacting scenes I have is when we were taking the train. I took the train back to Beijing from Pyongyang, and we were looking at the scenes of people in some of those villages, and they really live in awful conditions. One of the scenes that I remember well is when I was at one of the train stations and seeing tons of people in line to get out of a train station. So I asked one of my friends, why are the people waiting in line to get out? And that's because there's no freedom of movement in North Korea. To go from point A to point B, you need to have a government permit. And there's army people at every train station to make sure that people are allowed to be in that city. But overall, the conditions are very poor. You see people riding bicycles or even walking miles and miles and miles, despite the fact that they have 12-lane highways but hardly any cars to get to work.
Paul Beaudry, fascinating. We're looking at the photos you took as we talk. In just 10 seconds, would you recommend going to North Korea other than supporting a regime? Is there any, or opposing the regime, is there any tourist value to it, or is it just to glimpse inside a prison?
Well, it is a glimpse inside a prison. It is a glimpse inside of the last remaining Stalinist regime in this world. So in terms of that, there's a value to it. And it'll make you realize how important it is to have a regime that is open to freedom and free markets, to have a society that lives well.
Thank you, Paul. We're out of time. Appreciate you coming on the show, folks.